Welcome. I'd like to welcome everybody to the April 2nd, 2024 meeting of the Milford Planning and Zoning Board. If we could please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance and a moment of silence. Sue, if you would please call the roll.
Mr. Agnes? Present. Mr. Alling?
Here.
Mr. Anderson?
Present.
Mr. Hirsch?
Here.
Mr. Collegian?
Present.
Mr. Macchio?
Here.
Mr. Mortimer?
Present.
Mr. Zaharides?
Here.
And Chairman Quish.
I'm here as well. First order of business is a public hearing. The hearing has been closed. We do need to vote by May 30th. 104 Edgewater Place, Zone R 12.5. Petition of Kevin Crusading Esquire for a coastal site plan review to construct a single-family dwelling on map 45, block 513, parcel 39, of which Brenton C. Arts is the owner. David, if you want to just refresh us, please, before we open our discussion.
You have an application for a coastal area site plan review. The board opted to turn it into a public hearing to get comments from the neighbors. That hearing has closed. The board was waiting to hold a vote on this pending a submission that was sent to the Harbor Commission, and the Harbor Commission approved the application. So if you decide to vote on this, a simple majority is all that's needed.
Thank you. If you would please put the letter from the Harbor Commission up so that we can see it. It's not really an approval. It merely states that the application is consistent with the harbor plan. They don't really have the right or the authority to approve or stop a particular project that they're consulted. So I'd like to just open up by saying that this was, we did vote to permit a public hearing. We had an intervener with status. It's been fairly complicated, much different than most site plans that we get, which are generally cut and dried. There are issues with other properties that we have acted upon, which we may have done wrong. And I don't think that if we did do something wrong, we shouldn't be a precedent for doing it wrong again. I think that the complications are noteworthy in that these various lots were designed for a specific purpose, for docks, not to be combined for houses. And I know there's complicated legal arguments on both sides of the issue, and we're not a jury, and some of us aren't lawyers. But at this point, I'd like to open it up for comment or discussion amongst the board, and then I would call for a motion. Would anybody like to speak to this issue?
Mr. Chairman, the application before us is 104 Edgewater. In your comments you just made, you just referenced other properties. I'm not sure that's appropriate. We're here to decide one issue, not other issues of adjoining properties. I think we're here, and I think the other members would agree with me, we're here to decide only the issue as to this application for a site plan and not be involved in what other properties may be in the surrounding area.
No, thank you for that. I do think that the history of the neighborhood and And the intent of the original subdivision is important to me personally. Everyone, again, has a right to their opinion and their individual vote. And oftentimes we disagree, so as this is the case here. Any further comments or questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I don't think this is complicated at all. I think the application is substantially compliant with our zoning regulations. You know, we have an obligation to treat the applicant fairly, even though some of the folks here might be against it. We've treated this as a lot. It is a lot. We've permitted it before. It's embarrassing to say we permitted something that we didn't have to, but we did permit this lot before. It's on the tax rolls since 1980 at least. This is a lot, and there's going to be a house there. The question really is there going to be a house after they sue us and beat us, or we're going to just grant this like we should tonight? There was a comment made by one of our guests who said that just because we can doesn't mean we should. In this case, I think we can and we have to, because we have to treat a landowner fairly, and that landowner has to understand what he's buying when he buys it, what he can put on it when he buys it, and to have this situation where somebody could buy something knowing that it's a lot, apply for permits and get permits knowing that it's a lot, and all of a sudden, because he wants to build something there that his neighbors don't agree with, now all of a sudden we're going to change the rules. The rules are the rules, and I think we should vote for this tonight.
Thank you for that. Any further questions or comments? Mark?
We should follow the rules, and I believe a rule was not followed in that 6.1.4 where non-conforming lots are required to have a certificate of zoning compliance. These are non-conforming lots, and there is no certificate of zoning compliance.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yeah, I'd like to echo that we do have what we consider a non-conforming lot would have to have had a non-conforming structure on it. And I do believe there was an issue of a notice of zoning compliance that it's been argued that was not issued where it should be in order to make this a compliant application. So I do think, I do understand Mr. Collegian's position that there is, potential harm to the applicant, and so that makes it difficult for us. If it was just cut and dried, everything would just go to David or to staff, but we are elected here to consider the issues and the facts on each application. So with that being said, if there's nothing further, I'd hear a motion. Yes.
I'll make the motion. I move to approve with conditions the petition of Kevin Cresceden Esquire for a coastal site plan review to construct a single-family dwelling on map 045, lot 513, parcel 39, of which Brendan Arts is the owner. The condition I would attach is that the applicant shall comply with the recommendation contained in the email from John Goucher to David Selkis dated January 16, 2024, to wit, new filter infiltration placed at each of the downspouts in the parking area shall be tested after compaction to confirm that their hydraulic conductivity meets the recommendations of the 2004 Connecticut Stormwater Quality Manual of between 0.3 to 5 inches per hour.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, Sue, if you would please call the roll.
Mr. Agnes?
Against the motion.
Mr. Alling?
With the motion.
Mr. Anderson,
With the motion.
Mr. Hirsch,
Against the motion.
Mr. Collegian,
I'm with the motion.
Mr. Machio,
With the motion.
Mr. Mortimer,
I am against the motion.
Mr. Zaharides,
Against the motion.
Chairman Quish.
I'm also against the motion.
The motion fails.
The motion fails. If there are people that are here just for that, they're well welcome to leave now if they would do so quickly and quietly. We go on to our next order of business. 27 Point Beach Drive, Zone R75, petition of Adam Verneau, Ocean County Construction LLC, for a special permit to rebuild a seawall and patio on map 030, block 636, parcel 11, of which David and Marcia DeLuke are the owners. The applicant has the floor.
Yes, my name is Adam Vernot, like you had said, with Ocean County Construction. We are a marine construction business. We're here to represent the DeLuke family. We have permission from the State of Connecticut DEP and also the Army Corps of Engineers to do a repair on the seawall at this property.
David, if you would please brief us on your report.
The applicant is proposing to repair an existing seawall. The repair is within 25 feet of the mean high water line, which makes the application a special permit per section 4.1.16.2. The project has been reviewed by the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection and was approved and licensed by them on October 23rd, 2023. The proposed project is zoning compliant.
Thank you. This is a public hearing, so if anybody from the public would like to speak to the issue. Seeing none, we'll close the public hearing. Are there any questions or comments from the board?
Yeah, I have a question. This is a straight repair of the wall. This isn't adding anything. It's just a repair of the damage.
Yes, there's large voids in the wall and concrete that is missing. It has fallen off over the years. So what we're going to be doing is, doing like a facelift in the wall and the cap itself and the return walls that go back into the property.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, I'd hear a motion.
Motion I move to approve as presented, the petition of Adam Vermont, Ocean County Construction LLC for a special permit to rebuild a seawall and patio on map 030, block 636, parcel 11, of which David and Marissa DeLuke are the owners.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
Do we have a motion and a second? Any discussion? If not, Sue, please call the roll.
Mr. Agnes,
With the motion.
Mr. Alling,
With the motion.
Mr. Anderson,
With the motion.
Mr. Hirsch,
With the motion.
Mr. Collegian,
I'm with the motion.
Mr. Machio,
With the motion.
Mr. Mortimer,
With the motion.
Mr. Zaharides,
With the motion.
Chairman Quish.
I'm also with the motion. Good luck with your repair.
Thank you.
Next order of business is our old business, our open discussion on regulation changes. We're interested in and grateful for Mr. Smith and Ms. Shosens to join us in a conversation about affordable housing. and what we can collectively think up to address the need for affordable housing as well as the desire to prevent undue disruption to neighborhoods due to the way 830G has been manifesting itself in Milford. Well, Mr. Smith, you seem to have a PowerPoint ready. I'd go ahead and I'd like to treat this as informally as we possibly can, and
Sure.
Just contribute as you will. And
Yeah, I appreciate it.
If the board has questions, if it's okay with you both, just to shout out and just make it a conversation. Great, thank you.
Want me to go first, Amy? Okay. So, Mr. Chairman, a couple of things. I actually engaged a consultant to run some numbers for the board from an expert standpoint. Well, I think I'm an expert. I'm not officially one. So I'd like to give you a couple copies of this, maybe to pass around, and I'll leave one with David as well.
David, do you have this electronically?
I only had it. For now, it is.
I have the PowerPoint. I don't have the handout.
Okay, well, we'll get this.
We'll get that, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get this to everybody
Yeah.
at one point.
It just supports what you're going to see in this document, so.
Perfect,
Yeah,
thanks.
it's a start. So inclusionary housing, its risk and impacts. My opinions and my experience, 40 years being a real estate developer, I've done over $1 billion in real estate development, much of it in Milford. We are currently the second largest taxpayer here, soon to be the largest taxpayer. I don't think anyone knows Milford, the Milford housing market better than myself, just because of all the decades of time spent building different types of housing units, from single families, multifamilies, condominiums. I've done, so many different classes of real estate, residential real estate here. So, the first question is, what are the affordable housing rental rates in Milford required to meet the 830G guideline? And let me see if I can make that better. Is that better? Hold on, it should come back. It's not. I can't see that far, guys. So today, if you run the calculations based on the area median income, we're required to use the family size, things that Amy will explain to you. A studio at 60% of the AMI is $1,025 a month. A studio at 80% of AMI is $1,203 a month. A one-bedroom at 60% of the AMI is $1,045 a month. A one-bedroom at 80% of AMI is $1,493 a month. A two-bedroom at 60% AMI is $1,228 a month. And a two-bedroom at the 80% level is $1,729 a month.
So David, if you would just quickly refresh us on, we have a 30% affordability in
Coming up right now.
for 830G, and then then the percentages are 80-20, 80 at 60, 20 at 60 and 80 at 80, is that accurate?
No, 830G is 15% at 80% AMI and 15% at 60% AMI. So you have
Okay,
two
so
tiers
it's-
that you have to meet the 830G requirement to,
So it's the same percentage, they're the same percentage of 60 and 80?
yes,
Okay,
15 and 15.
and
yes.
combined it equals
Yeah.
30, so it's 15 each?
Right.
Gotcha, okay, thank you. I jumped the gun, I'm sorry.
No, it's fine. So I think the first step is to go over the financial impact of what a project, what 20% affordable, I think is what you're proposing, Mr. Chair, and what it would, how it would affect a project. So first we start with the rents. So market rent in Milford, less the 80% affordable rent. This is to get the differential, right? You can't zoom in on that? Just scroll over. Yeah, there you go. There. That's helpful. At least you can see that. So, generally speaking, market rates, at least in my apartments in Milford, studios are $1,900 a month. The 80% affordable rate is $1,203 a month. So there's a differential to the developer, to the owner, landlord, of $697. The one bedroom is $2,200 in Milford now, and you know the 80% rent is $1,493, and the two bedroom is $2,800, and the 80% level is $1,729. Resulting in a loss of $1,071 a month. So when you value real estate is like a bond. It has a yield. That's what determines market value. The market determines the yield based on factors like risk, location, etc. 10-year treasury yield rates at the time and how it relates to that risk. That's a 0 point of risk. And then real estate benches from that. And multifamily is one of the lower capitalization rates and the safest investments, so it has a lower rate of return required. So I picked a 6% capitalization rate to use for this presentation. So can you scroll up, Dave? There you go. So this is the reduction in net operating income, NOI. That's the money that's yielded from the property and impairment to the value. So for a studio unit, you annualize the rates, you divide by the cap rate. So for a studio unit, it's worth $139,400 less than a market rate unit would be. The one bedroom is $141,400 less than it would be if it was a market rate unit, and the two bedroom is $214,200 less than if it was a market rate unit. Okay, you gotta zoom back out. There you go. Okay. Yeah, there you go. Nope, you gotta go in a little more, Dave, because you're not missing the top. Can you zoom the top? There it goes. So this is an example, a 20% inclusionary requirement at 80% AMI, its impact on a 100-unit development. So if someone wants to build 100 units, you require 20% affordable. I use the highest rent here at 80%, not the lowest, okay? I would assume that's what you would do. That would still count towards your 830G goal. The project unit mix would be 20 studios, 61 bedrooms, and 22 bedroom units. The market value as a market rate, 100-unit development, is $28,533 and change. With a 20% affordable, with 20% affordable units, the market value adjusted for affordable units is $25,422,000 total reduction in market value is $3,111,000. Again, using only the 80% level, not the 60%. So it's like an 11% reduction in the value of the real estate that the developer has to say, is this still worth building? I mean, if you can make 10% on a project that big, that's pretty normal and to be expected for the risk and the capital you deploy. You're taking away $3 million from that with a 20% inclusional requirement.
Question for you, Mr. Smith. So the valuation is relevant in terms of what you can, how you can leverage it, how you can borrow against it, and if you decided to sell the 100-unit buildings. One of the aspects of real estate and rental real estate, as you know, is obviously the cash flow and how that pencils. Now, we look at this, and these are real numbers. I'm sure I don't question anything. But if you had the same development in, say, Stratford or Oxford or something, where you have maybe a little softer cost of entry with the purchase of the property, material costs would be about the same, quality pretty much the same. You may end up with a 100-unit project that only pencils out at 22 million. So it's really specific to Milford that these are relevant. And
These are specific to Milford.
Right. So a project, and obviously we've seen some affordable projects built, so they do pencil out in terms of cash flow and making it worth doing because of the other aspects, not just the total valuation for how you can leverage it, or if you were going to sell it.
Yeah, but it's all circular, so if
No, understood, but if you're maintaining it and you did an average of, you just looked at the whole thing as a reduction in, so you're now at 70%, 30% at 70, if you average the 80 and the 60 into 70, and you have, your monthly cash flow is down 8%? Is that about where the math comes? I'm just looking at the numbers from it's the same numbers, just sort of looking at them in a different way, so people that aren't in the real estate business can see just different aspects of it.
Right, so you always start with value, and a capitalization rate is used without leverage. So it's just an unlevered yield. Assuming you used all your cash, you built the building, it'll have a 6% yield. You can leverage that, and assuming interest rates are lower than the cap rate, you can get positive leverage. It's called positive leverage. Today, very hard to get that with interest rates where they are today. But if your yield is less than 6, then the value is lower. And then as the value goes lower, the bank lends you less money if you choose to use leverage, or you end up just getting a lower yield. And the intention is not to get a lower yield, it's to get a market yield. The market determines where that capitalization rate should be at any given time. And as a developer, you want to meet that cap rate at a minimum. You really want to build it and have, more value created, but at a minimum, you want to get this 6%, this 6% cap rate.
Understood.
Yeah, it's hard to explain. Go ahead.
This is pretty informal, right, Mr. Chairman?
Okay. Yes, please, just ask any questions you like. All right. Make any statements you like.
So what is your definition of market value? Because you use the term market value. Is that what it would sell for on the open market?
Correct.
So that's not the amount of money you're receiving every year from the rents. That's just how much you would sell on the open market if you were willing to sell the property.
Yeah, but that's a function of how much money you receive from the asset. That's where the value is determined, based on the cash flow it presents you and the current capitalization rate the market expects. So today it's 6%. And if you're not getting it 6%, you're going to sell it for less money to someone else.
Does your company typically build apartments and then sell it, or are you more of a buy and hold business?
We're mostly a buy and hold business.
So then why do you care about the market value if you're just trying to hold these into perpetuity?
again, it's a circular conversation. The cap rate determines the market value. The yield is what we need to get to provide a return on our capital invested. So if that's the best way to say it. Mark, you have another?
Yeah, well, why is your examples off of 6% when we're above 6% interest rates? So you're essentially making nothing on this. So why would you even?
Well, you're making 6%.
6%, but you're also paying you're getting a loan off of this, correct?
Well, sometimes, yes, you would, but you would
Yeah,
get
just to
a loan
clarify-
you get a loan based on 70%.
Yeah, just to clarify, the
And
6%,
you can borrow at 5.5% from Freddie Mac today.
just to clarify what Mr. Hurst said, is that the 6% is not profitability on a unit or on a yearly basis. It is just like when you buy a business, there's a multiple of what the EBITDA is. This is, real estate's just a little bit different. They do it on this exact precise formula that we're saying. So whether a project is making, I don't know, 100 units, if you're showing a $100,000 profit a year, then you're showing that. It's really nothing to do with the actual the numbers we're seeing now. You know, it's just it's a different way of looking at it. I understand what Mr. Smith is saying. That's how the property is valued, but it doesn't directly relate to profitability monthly or yearly. Yep.
So Mark, to answer your question, cap rate is a combination of yield on equity and yield on investment. So it wouldn't necessarily be unprofitable for the yield rate, the interest yield rate to be higher than the cap rate because that is baked in.
And do you feel like you want to jump in at any particular time here, Amy?
I am happy to defer to Mr. Smith on all of the financials. I am here to answer any questions about, whether it's 830G or some of the other kind of more technical legal things. But Mr. Smith and I have had plenty of conversations, and I know how I often have to answer some questions for him too about, some of the technicalities of how, the calculations are done for rentals or otherwise. So I'm happy to continue deferring to him, but if anybody has any questions that don't involve cap rates, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, I'm sure we will have some. So one thing that underpins the, say, $2,900 two-bedroom rate is Milford and its fabric, right? So if in fact we leave 830G unfettered and just let it happen the way it happens, that will diminish everything in the market. And that's an argument that is hypothetical. It's obviously not provable, but if in fact we end up with affordable developments that impact neighborhoods and impact rents throughout the whole city, it will have a negative and a downward draw on rents in general.
I will interrupt you on that, though.
Yeah, okay.
There
please do.
are studies that show that that is not the
Yeah.
case. So to the extent that there is a concern that you put in an 830G development and it brings down the value of the surrounding properties, that is not the case. There are studies, we're happy to get them for you.
No,
but that's-
I appreciate that, and I wasn't really thinking about it neighborhood by neighborhood. I'm just thinking that if 830G disrupts the fabric, if in fact, and I'm not saying that it does, and I'm not saying that it will, but if it does disrupt the fabric to a point where you're taking, obviously certain neighborhoods feel that it has hurt their single-family homes, and that the value there, again, it's anecdotal, so I really don't know. It's more of a hypothetical that the quality of the fabric of the town is what allows a $2,900 rent here, where in Oxford or Seymour, they may get $2,200 for a two-bedroom. So I'm just saying that...
But you're also going to have an AMI difference. That what then happens is, remember that it's an area you're using, and this is where we get into the technicalities of the statute, whether you're using 830G proper or it's being implemented, each of these, Milford is in, and it's actually the New Haven area for the AMI is actually pretty broad. It goes all the way to Branford, it comes to Milford, it goes north to Wallingford.
What does AMI stand for?
Area median income. And so what winds up happening is that depending on where you are, there's going to be an adjustment, whether it's here, and this area is a little bit lower than the statewide median. And what winds up happening is you have to, under 830G, you're using the lesser of the two numbers. So if you were in an area where the AMI was higher, Stamford, Fairfield County in particular, those, you're going to use the statewide numbers, so they might actually be a little bit higher depending on what town you're in. And so you do get, and I think that was the important thing for Mr. Smith, was that these are very Milford-specific numbers and consistent with what the AMI are. It's hard to extrapolate some of these figures because of the adjustments to the area median income as you move around the state. Yeah.
Thank you.
So you referenced studies that were done to show that putting in affordable housing 830G units did not affect the overall fair market value of surrounding properties.
Right, it's not just 830G. Most of the studies have been done in, the ones I've seen are nationwide, so depending on whether it's Massachusetts has a analog to 830G, New Jersey has a variation of it. The studies I've seen have been, not limited to Connecticut, but just generally any kind of mixed income housing like you would have under 830G, those have had no notable impact on value.
Were those studies issued, or was the data from those studies issued prior to January 1 of 2020? In other words, when were those studies promulgated?
I've certainly read them since 2020. I don't remember some of the dates off the top of my head.
Right, and you do realize since 2020 we've seen a massive spike surge in the in property values around this country.
Absolutely.
And wouldn't that explain why there's no effect as opposed to just regular market forces?
Unlikely, because you would have had, in order to have a study done, you would have seen those figures, and anything that was coming on board would not, since 2020, is probably just operational now, so you wouldn't have any way to study post-2020 figures yet. You're looking at everything uniformly pre-2020.
So the studies that are coming out today are using the math from pre-2020?
No, I'm saying that anything that is coming on board to be studied today was probably approved at least 2 or 3 years ago. I mean, Mr. Smith can tell you about construction timeframes, but the time you have from you issue an approval as P&Z, you have construction, you have lease up, and then if you have a full lease up and you need to study something after, something that would just be studied today was probably approved 3 or 4 years ago. So I think you're not at the point where you would even have the option to have studies available for what would be 2020 forward, because you wouldn't have had, you would just be getting to the point where you could study it.
Well, either way, it would be nice to know what data set we're looking at. I guess that really doesn't tell us anything. So we're looking for ways to implement more affordable housing, basically. And what I'm hearing is you can't afford it.
No, I think that's up to you.
I don't mean to be glib.
Yeah, if I could finish, because I think I'm building a story I'd like you to see, and it may help you. So, the next question is, can the city ever reach 10% qualified affordable units? Milford has 23,749 housing units. 1,257 units qualify for 830G. This is just 5.29% to be released of the 830G. A town needs 10% affordable units. So Milford needs 2,375 units or 1,118 additional qualifying units to meet the 10% goal. For reference, in 2022, Milford built 87 homes with 38 single-family homes. In 2021, Milford built 199 homes with 36 single-family homes. In 2020, Milford built 161 homes with 32 single-family homes. So excluding single-family homes, this is an average of 114 units per year. So with a 20% inclusionary requirement, Milford would have to build 5,590 housing units to generate the additional qualifying units needed to be released of the 830G status. I just think that's important to know. I'm not against affordable housing. I don't want you to think that. I'm not. It's maybe how much you require, not if you require. I don't want you to think that I am, because I'm not. I'm just giving you the facts. So, material things to consider, material factors. So, the first paragraph there, it's like, I don't know if Dave can zoom in a little bit for you. Just can you roll your mouse? I'll read it to you. At the current rate of home construction in Milford, and with a 20% affordable requirement, it could take over 40 years to reach the 10% threshold. For 2023, and this is very important, for 2023, Milford has a rating of 99 on the Affordable Index, as published by the ERSI U.S. Census Bureau. The highest favorable rating is 100. The New Haven County Index is 83, and Connecticut is 89. This shows that Milford's balance of housing affordability is almost perfect. This is a phenomenal number, and that's what the document, Mr. Chairman, I gave you from the consultant, he publishes all this data for you so you can see it. It's not something I made up. He had access to these, this data source to show it. But the country is 94, we're 99, and the higher the number, the more balanced, the more affordable your community is. So Milford really has an affordable housing stock. You may not agree with it, you hear all the discussions, people complain and all that, but all we can do is go by the numbers, and all I can do is give you the data. You decide, I respect what you decide, but you should know that. Milford has a great, and part of the reason is its zoning regulations the zoning regulations here have very diverse housing choices with very small lots, large lots, high density, low density. It's worked. I mean, it's worked. The macroeconomic environment of household ownership is difficult nationally, but Milford's done a pretty good job, and I think you need to know that in your decision process. Another factor, during the last decade, interest rates were at historic lows, which improved the feasibility of 830G developments in Milford. With the new higher interest rate environment, rates have really doubled. Development activity will slow, if not stop. I really believe this hyper low interest rate environment helped these 830Gs get going, because it's another metric of cash flow, right? Very high positive leverage. We have, 3 years ago, cap rates were 5%, but interest rates were 3%. So that's a very positive leverage situation. The more you borrow, the more money you leverage, the more money you can make, the more cash flow you can make. That's really changed, and I don't really see it. I see it coming down a little bit, but not to the levels they were post-financial crisis. The real estate market is changing with the continued evolution of technology. Brick and mortar retailers restructuring and reducing size across the country. Office buildings are facing significant vacancy as remote work takes hold. This will negatively affect Milford's grand list, and property tax revenues for these property types will fall. I think it's important for you to realize that you are like you're the caretakers of the grand list to some extent, the zoning board. How you zone things creates revenue. That, creates value, creates use, creates tax revenue. And I think you should know that there's a huge change going on with retail and office. Though, the mall is going through its renaissance and its difficulties and changes, and many strip centers on the Post Road, power centers have really struggled, and rents have fallen dramatically. All this is going to show up in lower grand list values. And really the only two, the last paragraph there, the two remaining real estate strongholds for the grand list growth are residential and industrial properties. Goods are shifting from grocery store shelves to warehouse shelves to support home delivery options, and people always need a place to live. Technology can't dislocate the need for housing. You're going to find that the two strongest grand list participants is industrial, and it will be residential, and it will continue to be now, more so than ever, as really almost your only choice to nurture and grow the grand list. Because so much of commercial real estate is going to start to fall in value, and it already has, and you've seen it. So it's something to be aware of when you make a decision like this, because again, it does lower the value of multifamily real estate. Doing this will lower the value of multifamily real estate. It will have an impact on taxes as well. So be careful of unintended consequences. The supply of new housing may falter. The requirement for affordable housing will significantly reduce the feasibility of new home construction. A reduction in the supply of new housing will cause existing housing units to increase rent and/or value. Simple supply and demand. If less are built, prices are going to go up, and you could start to hurt the value of hurt the affordability of our existing housing stock, because now there's less units coming online. This good faith effort may have the opposite of its intended effect and reduce affordability in Milford, which is near perfect right now. And that's a fact. And read Realty Concepts' letter. You can find other people to give you this information. Hold on, stay right there. So the other consequence, the grand list. Again, the changing real estate market is dynamic with lasting negative effects on property values for retail and office properties. Without creating a favorable real estate entitlement process for residential and industrial development, taxes will rise as retail and office properties decline in value, again, negatively affecting affordability in Milford. If taxes rise, that's another hit to affordability. It costs more to own a home. It costs more to rent. Taxes go up. So you've got to be aware of the balance in your grand list. Again, you guys, you're the farmers of the grand list. Your decisions affect what that grand list is worth. So my recommendations: study information, source up-to-date information to understand Milford's housing mix and affordability. Engage a consulting firm to study this proposal and model its potential effectiveness and outcome. You need experts. You should find an expert to help you with this decision, to give you the metrics, to give you all the elements to make an informed decision, to all the effects, the reverberations of this. It's a big decision. I think you need to rezone and rework. Look to rezone the OD, DO10, and DO25. These are design office districts, to include high-density multifamily. Leave all industrial zones unchanged. And I keep bringing that up because I heard in one of your meetings You talked about some industrial land, maybe rezoning those. So I just really want you to know how valuable they are to the economy today, this new technology-driven economy. You know, review the CDD zones to increase potential density and encourage multifamily construction. I think new categories. I think we should consider, or the board should consider, high-density single-family homes for larger tracts of land, probably in the OD and the DO zones. These are small houses, 20 feet apart, held as common interest communities as to land only. So you can do really high-density single-family, small houses, 1,200 square feet. They can be 20 feet apart. The land is land in common, condominium, not the building. Because when buildings are attached, Kiowa says the condo association has to own the structure and manage it. When they're single-family detached, you don't have to do that. You just... No, this is just the condominium verbiage. So they share in the land together, so the roads are plowed, they cut the lawns together, they don't have to share the building with each other. But so many of these young people would love a little house for themselves, and they can't find it. But you can, David could create some metrics for high-density single-family housing zones that, lots of houses close together, but single-family.
Yeah, like co-housing, intentional communities with common amenities. And,
yes, they would be so successful.
By building those, are they also less expensive because you have economies of scale? You can have...
Yes.
You can, in other words, the materials, et cetera, is more in bulk. You get a better deal from suppliers.
Yeah, and it's just more units per acre, of land. So, it is different than buying a single family lot, and it's different when you do it in a large scale like that. You're correct.
Do those exist anywhere in Milford right now?
Yeah, it's something like that, right over on I don't know the address. There is something I saw like that over near.
It's on the eastern part of town, I think.
Yeah, over near FCP Euro, like one of those roads up there. There's something.
Well, there was on Hill Street.
That's it, Hill Street.
Yeah, but
there's one on Hill Street you could drive by.
Yeah, I don't think those are individual units. I think some of them are attached.
No, I thought they were they look individual.
I could be wrong.
Okay.
It's been a while.
Yeah, you can Google it and look up and see it online. You can see.
Where? You can give me an address.
No, you could Google high-density single-family housing, and you could see some examples of what I'm talking about. But I think it's an interesting alternative to just broad-scale, multi-story, multi-family.
Right. So there's going to be a lot of tools in the bag in order to get impact, and I think that your perspective is valuable and invaluable in a sense, because you've been building here, your family's been building here for
3 generations.
Yeah, decades and decades. I think part of the conversation, and we're going to bring in other people over the next few months to look at it from a different perspective, and it is identify the problem, right? So one of the problems is that 830G can go in and ruin a neighborhood where you have a single-family house, now you have 15 units. That's disturbing to the people's frame of mind, their enjoyment of their homes, unhappy people. There's also a situation where, again, it's the gentrification of Southern Connecticut, and it's the case that there are people that are, retiring, getting seniors, the baby boomers that maybe want to stay but can't because they find it not affordable. And then a generation of children, whether they're in their 30s or younger, that have roots here but can't really afford the single-family house or the rent or whatever. So there's pressure from all sides. And so what we're hoping to do here with your council, and that people will bring in, whether they're experts or members of the community that are actively researching other ways of doing things. And so a question that I have for you is that we are looking at other zones, and we are looking at one specifically the CDDs, where we have these strip malls that aren't really functioning, but what would it take, again, you're more of a pure residential builder, but to take these strip malls and put a carrot out there, say, okay, you can take this and you can go up, is it 40 feet? What's the carrot? What do we need to do to help developers to get that density? And again, we don't have a ton of land left for intentional communities or co-housing situations, but we do have miles and miles and miles of strip malls that could be developed into mixed use with affordability as a component.
So I think that's a great question, and it's difficult in Milford to go over 4 stories. When you go over 4, you end up in a new building code that it becomes very expensive to build. And you can do it in Stamford, you can do it in Greenwich, you can do it in Norwalk, you can do it in New Haven. I've done it in New Haven. I've done that building class before. Milford, it gets really, really difficult to go, over 4. But you really can't do 4 now. So I think that's a great, idea on the CDDs to at least let them go 4 stories and still have a decorative, not just have a flat roof, which can be unattractive. We measure to the middle of the, of a gable roof, right? So some rewriting of that height requirement, I think, would help to let them go 4 stories, but yet still have attractive roof lines that fit the character of Milford. That is helpful. I mean, for sure, that's helpful, and I think the CDD zones are perfect for that.
What is the barrier between going over 4? Is it our fire apparatus, or what is?
Well, it becomes steel. It becomes a different class of construction, so much more expensive to build, well over $200 a foot, and the rents in Milford can't support that.
Right.
In Stamford, a 1 bedroom's $3,200, in Greenwich it's $4,500, and those are, but they can support higher costs per square foot than we can here. I really
But
believe.
even one thing on that, Bob's right that the construction difference is noticeable. What also happens in those, and I've worked in Stamford for a long time, and particularly as their inclusionary zoning regulation came into effect, and including on some of the developments I worked on, as you get into that kind of high-rise development, what a lot of them did, because of the construction costs that Bob mentioned, and the delta between a market rate and an ongoing affordable rate, was that Stamford has a program where you pay a fee in lieu. So rather than putting the below market rate unit, as they classify them, in the building, you can pay a specified amount, and it's targeted to what level of income. They've made some adjustments over the years, and then that fund, created by people contributing to the fund, is then used for the creation of affordable housing. A lot of times it was used to close financing gaps on things that were tax credit developments, or things that the Housing Authority was doing. Housing Development Fund in Stamford is a nonprofit that has done some sort of co-op type ownerships with shared appreciation, things like that. So what they did in that circumstance was, not only do they have their inclusionary requirement that has the component on site, they did, in certain circumstances, and it was a special exception, the board had to approve it, but they also created a mechanism to have funds flow to other developers to leverage for the creation of more affordable housing. And where you wind up in some of those developments is that by putting certain things, whether it's tax credit financing or whether it's equity or other things, you get a higher percentage of affordable units in certain developments, because you have all of these bits and pieces of money that can all come together. You're not reliant on a single bank to lend 70 or 80% of the development, because you're getting $2 million here, 3 million here and
Yeah,
putting
it's
all
a
that
very
together.
complicated capital stack that gets
Yeah.
these tax credit jobs done. If you could provide any information on the shared equity that you've experienced, that could be, again, it's some of these things that we're going to try to hope to do are not specifically this board. The aldermen
Right.
would have to buy into it. They would have to create a mechanism for Milford to do their own development or support some tax credit work or to have a fee in lieu of and a fund to support that. So it's bigger than what we can do, but I think it's important that we start the conversation and, look at the different options and opportunities, really.
Right.
And so, can you tell us, I don't think we have had any affordable projects that the units were sold. Can you tell us about how that actually functions, that someone could do an 830G and have the units sold off as condominiums?
Yeah, so when I first started practicing virtually in 99, virtually all of the 830Gs that I worked on were sale developments. And then the market kind of shifted, combination of interest rates, what the market, I think, overall was looking for, particularly post-2008. And I don't think I've seen a for-sale 830G in quite a while. I think because the construction costs and everything associated with that. I worked on the city's moratorium. I think the last one that I saw in all of those, all of the developments that we used for points in the moratorium, I think Pond Point was the last one that I saw that was a...
Forest Park had, because I built it, and it was one of the first 830Gs for sale. I actually did on Forest Road, and there's
that's
30
a
or
sale.
40 of them there that we
Right.
sold. They were sold for $85,000. That's how old I am. Back then.
But there have not been many, I would
Can't.
say, in the last
Housing-
15
no.
years or so.
Costs are so high.
Right.
The land value is what you're going to sell them for.
Right.
But how does it work? You have 30% that are originally sold. What about resale? Is that unit?
It's exactly the same process. The one difference that happens between the sale units and the rental units is that the rental units, in order to ensure that you keep the percentages that you're required to have, you may turn over what was somebody who moves out of an affordable unit because they're over income. You don't have somebody potentially available, so the unit itself may shift. It might be unit 2 this year, but 3 years from now maybe it's unit 4, just because of how your leasing turnover. With the sale units, unit 2 is the affordable unit. It's the household qualifies at the time of sale, and then you could live there for 30 years and be over income. You are just limited to the same formula on the back end of selling it to in accordance with the formula for a sale unit, which is, again, just like the rental income, based on 30% area median income, adjusted for bedroom size for the household unit, all those things. So the only thing that happens is at sort of the bottom of the formula, it's what's your mortgage amount versus what's your rental amount.
And so if you got a raise, you could stay in your apartment or your condo. It's only...
If you're an owner,
It accelerates
yes.
at sale, and then there's a new set of criteria that you have to prove the buyer qualifies income
Exactly.
requirements. Okay. And they change every year, obviously. But,
Yep.
Okay, great,
Exactly.
thank you. And there's no Connecticut Finance Authority, there's no other oversight besides your local, whatever entity is verifying the units in general? There's no CFA gets in the middle of it? or
Correct,
anything?
no, they don't get into the middle of it. It was actually something that we ran into with the moratorium and making sure that units, we had updated information as far as part of the affordability plan, any of the rental units are confirmed annually. It's not, by individual name, it's by unit number, so it's not personally identifiable information, but the administrator of the affordable units is certifying that to the P&Z office annually to make sure that everybody's in compliance. If not, it's a zoning violation and you can issue
But
basically a cease and desist order.
Amy, it is on title too, correct? I mean, it's in
It
the
is.
title.
It's, right, so the deed restriction's on the title, so you couldn't, you know, if you
Title
owned-
insurance would catch
if
it.
you owned an office, you know,
Right.
you owned a multifamily building and it had an affordability restriction, you couldn't sell it because the deed restriction's there, but the annual certification is through the administrator of the affordability plan, and that's the person that's designated in the plan to provide all that. It's the same person who qualifies tenants for the units in the first place.
And have you seen anything that you could call out as best practice in our general area or your experience that can sort of point us in the right direction? Because I think we're going to have to take a number of directions, question one and question two. If we start taking some proactive steps, is there a chance for another moratorium?
I would concur with the numbers. The issue is how many units have been built and how many are affordable. I think when we originally did the calculation, it was based on, you know, in the assumption that the city might qualify for another moratorium, was based on the development on Vic Drive that has not moved forward, and then there was another larger development that, if built, would, you know, basically get us to the number that would be required. I think at this point you need some larger developments that would generate the numbers that you need.
And in terms of getting, I don't think we've had any tax credit housing. I don't know of any. But is there something we can do to encourage that? You know, carve out a piece of the city that may be...
Oh, I think that's
maybe a
the
fit.
way to do it. I think that's important. Fine. The city has a lot of land. I mean, the city owns lots of land, and these projects, you know, affordable projects, subsidized. You can partner with developers to build these. Would go a long way. They could be 100% affordable, and a long way to help you. I mean, I really want you to consider that it's almost impossible to alleviate the 830G pressure from the city of Milford. It would take decades to do. You know, we're building 100 units a year in total. That would just be 20 affordable units a year. Just to give you context, Stanford is average during the same period was 185 units. New Haven is the busiest at 500 units a year. They're going vertical, you know, major vertical density. So I think you have two problems you're facing. One is you want more affordable housing, and I agree with that, and I think that's, you know, the right discussion to have. The other is trying to alleviate 830G. I don't know if you could ever do that, and I think the numbers show that that's never going to happen. The way to alleviate is legislatively, you know, pushing your legislators to change something, and I think that's going to happen, you know, from my discussions. I think, you know, in the next 10 years that may happen. A lot of towns are adding a 10% requirement to every new development, a 10% affordability. I think 830G's penetrated and made their point. I don't know politically if it'll survive another 10 years, but I just don't want you to focus on alleviating that, because I don't think you can.
No, I think you're right. There's more than one problem, and there's
Yes.
definitely more than one solution.
Right.
It's all puzzle pieces.
Yes.
Mr. Allen.
Thanks, Eitan. I tend to agree that if the only goal is to alleviate 830G, then this strategy probably isn't going to do that anytime soon. But I also think that there's clearly a huge need in Milford, regardless of 830G. I know you didn't produce the 99 out of 100 score yourself, but I know people who are homeless. I know people who are facing eviction. I know people who are my age, wanting to get a home.
Yeah.
We have encampment. It's raining outside right now. You know, there are people sleeping outside in Milford. So to give us a 99% seems, like I said, I know it's not your number, but
It's
to
a
me,
US
that's
government number.
yeah.
Yeah.
The other kind of point I wanted to make is that you know, you showed us some very interesting and useful numbers about what 20% inclusionary housing would do to a project that otherwise, you know, is quote-unquote normal. But it seems like if you combine an inclusionary percentage with allowances for higher density in areas that currently don't allow that density, that can be an attractive option. And of course, the reason we know that is because developers choose that option with 830G. They use that to build apartment buildings in places that otherwise they couldn't, and they designate 30% aside for affordable housing. So it seems like if we followed some of these strategies and rezone some areas that currently don't allow apartments or a multifamily housing, and combined that with an inclusionary percentage, I don't know if 20% is the ideal number, but it seems like that would be an effective way to increase affordability here. That's just my interpretation.
I think those are all good metrics to consider. I think they're all elements. You know, I think 20% is going to be harmful to your housing stock and its growth, and you need to grow your housing stock. You still need to have supply. Stanford has a 10% requirement. Many towns, you know, have 10% requirements. I think that probably is where you'll end up. I think when you study this further, that's probably the number you'll end up with. Again, you're not going to alleviate the 830G. So be careful that your unintended consequences aren't that you stop having homes built in Milford, because that's just going to drive prices up. And I own 500 apartments in Milford. You'd be doing me a great favor by doing that. I'm here telling you not to do that and to induce more building, and I'll compete, but believe me, if a 20% requirement will actually help my portfolio go up in value. I'm here telling you not to do it.
Yeah, Mr. Smith, can you go back to the slide before that talks about the housing starts in 2020, 2021, and 2022? Right there. What contributed in your estimation to Milford building less than half the homes there that Milford was having built in 2020 and 2021? And can you tell us about 2023?
I don't have the 23 numbers. I think I can't pronounce his last name, Janikowski, he has the 23 numbers, I think, in his closing paragraph. Where was it? So he said from 2018 to 2023, you were averaging 120 units per year. 120 per year in Milford, including 2018 to 2023. Yeah, so I just had I don't have the data.
But in 2022, there were only 87 homes built.
Yeah.
Because think about, back to my comment about the studies, if you're pulling a building permit in 2022, you likely got that approved in 2020 or early 2021. That was not the busiest time for everybody to be getting building permits, because frankly nobody knew what was going on. So I think what you see is, and it's sort of true looking at some national numbers that I've seen, you saw a dip in permitting in late 2020, early 21, and then it's, you know, what you're seeing is that some of that's coming back up a little bit, but tamped down by interest rates. So you have, you know, that combination of things.
Right. In 21, I was 168 of the 199.
Yeah. I'm sorry?
I built 168 of the 199 in 2021.
Yeah. And what I'm getting at is, as a board, we can't control interest rates. Okay? Right. We have no control as a board. And as a board, we're not builders. We're a legislative body in a certain sense. So we can't control the building. So if you go back to the slide at the very end, just want to go forward.
Here?
No, your recommendations. And they're not so humble. They're pretty decent. It says consider high-density single-family homes we can't consider that. That's not what we do. We can only approve plans. We can't consider anything.
No, you can
I
legislate a zone.
completely disagree with you,
Please tell me how.
because you're the legislative body for planning and zoning. And so you put your zoning hat on, you can amend your regulations tomorrow and let 300 units go next door if you wanted to.
You can write zoning.
You create the framework by which your developers are going to come to you and put in applications. If you wanted to do all of the things on those slides, and I think if I left you with one comment that's really not necessarily legal, more is more. And there have been a lot of studies lately that in the context of housing, and particularly your question about, what has happened to housing prices, we have not built housing anywhere in the country at the rate that we need, given housing demographics, shifts in household sizes, particularly around here with smaller households needing 1 or 2 bedroom apartments. We have not built it. We have challenges here of, do we have people in the trades? I'm sure, you can hear all about the fact that how do you find a plumber to do this kind of construction project? And so at the end of the day, one of the things that you can do on the how do we deal with, we have people being evicted, we have people on the brink of foreclosure, we have people who are paying 50, 60, 70% of their income in rent, is literally more is more. The term
More
trickle
is
down,
good.
right? Trickle down economics doesn't quite always, has a sort of a negative connotation, but it truly is. There is a supply and demand, and we are very undersupplied for the amount of housing we need. Frankly, Bob and I would be happy to be here twice a month in front of you to say, we have another 20 units, we have another 100 units, we have, and you are in the position to put those regulations in place that would allow, probably not for the reasons that we discussed, a 10-story building, but a series of, 30 or 40 or 50 or 60 unit 4-story buildings starts to make a real dent in where your supply is. Obviously, if you have a year where you only have 200 units and, being built, and statewide, I was actually looking at the numbers earlier today, completely unrelated to this. Connecticut as a whole in 2023 built about 6,000 units. That's it. So you think about the fact that you have, the demographic shift out of a single family home. You might have a divorced couple, you have a retired couple who now has children. Where do all those people live? Where you're just so woefully undersupplied.
Yes, I don't think there's a shift out of single-family homes. I think what's happened is that the price of single-family homes has far outpaced the inflation rate. And I'm not sure how we're going to be able to, one, counteract inflation here. We don't print money in Connecticut or in Milford. And two, by the time you even get some housing stock up, you're talking 2, 3, 5 years down the road. So this isn't, you're not going to just snap your finger and get a 4-story, 80-unit development tomorrow.
You're not, but you can put it in place so that way 3 years from now it is here.
We're still going to have I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
We're still going to have a housing problem in 3 years.
No,
So
yes.
if we get started, I guarantee there's still going to be homelessness. There's still going to be people who can't afford to live.
Connecticut is short 70,000 homes, they say.
So
I mean, that's the
it may
latest.
take a long time, but that's all the more reason that we can get started sooner.
Yes, right,
If that
correct.
makes sense.
Look, I like the idea of the rezoning, the OD, DO, and DO 1025. That seems fairly reasonable. I don't know what the reaction of the market and what the builder community will be, but that's not the craziest thing I've ever heard.
Well, this is good that we're taking the first steps tonight. Obviously, we've had discussions about housing at the mall. Housing will come up in the industrial zones as well as not industrial, but the office zones, and CDD will be approaching them sort of. Unfortunately, it's the broadest brush that we can take is all multifamily has to have a component. That is at least a broad brush that gets us across the city. then we can start looking at individual commercial districts and other zones to start making changes.
Yeah.
One question that I'd like you to consider, you don't really have to shoot from the hip, but if we came up with a sliding scale, where would it be? 15 units at 10%, and then if you go over 30 units, you go to 12%. At one point, there's got to be an economy of scale.
Yeah.
And there's also, really want to hear what carrots would make sense.
Yeah,
You
so-
know, we want to, we'll 10%, and if you go to 15, we'll give you a carrot, we'll give you something.
So
You know,
here's the difficulty, and I watched your last meeting, and you talked about these smaller buildings get put into residential neighborhoods, and I understand that the difficulty that causes the people who live in that neighborhood, and, you know, the character changes, and it's not what they... Unfortunately, the small projects that are these are 3-unit buildings, they're 3 units attached, are much less expensive to build. They don't have to meet the handicap code that we have to build. We have to meet building bigger suburban projects. They don't need elevators. Their fire separations are different. The overall cost is different. Smaller developers are building those. They tend to do some of the work themselves. They'll dig the holes. They use the site work. They'll do the site work themselves. They do some of the carving themselves. They have an affordable program where a large-scale developer like myself building 150-unit projects, I need 7 elevators. I need type A handicap units, type B units. Everything changes. The costs are much higher for me than those smaller developers, smaller 3-unit. You notice they're all 3 units attached. There's a reason they're 3 units attached, because they don't have to meet the handicap code. So they're the ones that are going to continue to build, and the bigger ones that you need to meet your requirement to try to, to try to dilute 830G are harder to build. Because
so what would the carrot be? Tax abatement?
tax abatement is the #1 way to do it. If there was a way, to give you some reference, taxes in Milford for an apartment are about $4,000 a unit. So a 200-unit project generates really good tax revenue for the city. But net operating income is a function of its revenue minus its expenses, okay? And the net is what your yield is. So tax abatements are a great approach to it, and it could be in the tiers that you're trying to develop. It could be a tier, I think.
Understood, thank you. And a question with regard to our full stock. We need 10%. Do we need 5% at 80% and 5% at 60%? Or could we incentivize a developer and say, okay, you're not going to do 830G, but you're going to give us the 10 or 15%, and we'll let you make them all at 80%. Will that still help us in the calculation?
It does, and that's a question that sort of gets into the real weeds of how a moratorium works and how you earn points and what's included and not included in the 10% list. So by way of example, we think about, what the deed restricted units are as counting on the 10% list, and I think that's what everybody's focused. There is an entire column that is counted on the toward the 10% list that is CHFA, typically first-time home buyer mortgages. If the entire city of Milford, or half the city of Milford, had a CHFA mortgage, guess what? You may not have to worry about your deed restricted units because you have that counts towards your 10%. So the function of what is on the list varies a little bit from year to year because of some of those things. Somebody refinances, they no longer have a CHFA mortgage. Do they technically come off? How does that work? But as far as the, earning the points, you get, the points are calculated based on the type of unit. So first of all, whether it's a rental unit or an ownership unit, the income level, meaning 80%, 60%, 30% of area median income. And I use area because it's the lesser of statewide or area, and so everybody's just shorthands it to area. And then also what happens in the 830G developments is there is so by way of example, for a 60% two-bedroom unit in a rental development, I think you get 2 points per unit. A market rate unit in an 830G development gets you 1/4 of a point. So four market rate units still gets you a point, but the overall development has to comply with 830G. So you really get into these questions of, if you just had some units at 80%, you absolutely earn the points for those, but if the rest of the development isn't 830G compliant, so you only have 5% at 80%, the rest of those units don't get the market rate points. So you really, depending on how you wound up looking at it, the 830G developments do earn you something for the market rates, but there are certainly benefits. And we actually, Pond Point was one of them, where the way the settlement worked, the market rate units didn't count for the moratorium, but the affordable units did, and you still earned, there were still points earned from the development. So it really is just ultimately, when you get down to the details of what you want to do, we could absolutely talk about, what that would do from an ownership, from a calculation standpoint. The one other thing I wanted to mention to you, because it kind of comes up in the calculations and things. So again, I had started work in Stamford in 2005, 2006, and that was when they had started their inclusionary housing regulations. So at this point, they're not quite 20 years into the program, and what they realized a couple of years ago was that they had their regulatory requirement was 10% of the units at 50% of area median income. What wound up happening is they really did fill the need, because they got the combination of some fee and lieu money and enough development going on in Stamford that they started to fill that. They didn't have many units above, and they didn't have many units below. So what they did, I want to say it's like 3 or 4 years ago now, they have a range of income levels in their zoning regulations, and it's sort of a pro rata. So if you were required to provide 1 unit at 50%, but what you want to do is provide a unit at 80%, because maybe that works better for your pro forma or for your bank loan or whatever, well, maybe that means you need to provide 2 affordable units, but they're at the higher income level. If you want to provide 1, you were otherwise required to provide 2, but you want to provide 1, and you have that unit be at 30% of AMI, so very low income, that's going to earn you a different kind of credit. I'm happy, I'm sure David and I can share that with you, but it is something else that Stamford discovered after having a successful program for a number of years, that they needed to expand the range of affordability, which again, kind of getting back outside the 830G context, if you're thinking about it and what you want to do to address some of the things for what you know is a real need in Milford, having that range still gets you some options, and as long as it's below the 80% of AMI, it still gets you the points on the moratorium.
Yeah, that's really very good information, because I think that obviously the part of it really is that there is affordability problem, and maybe having no units being built at 60% is better to have 3 at 30% and make it work somehow with the developer. So yeah, we've got a lot of good ideas. Mr. Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask about housing that would be attracted to our aging population. There are a number of folks who remain in their starter homes who haven't moved, others who bought in the 90s and 2000s and who are overhoused, love Milford, wish to stay, and they feel that they have very limited options. So in terms of attracting that segment of the population, which probably numbers in the 20% range demographically. What would you offer us as options?
In our portfolio today, 25% of the tenants are over 65. And they love apartment living. You know, we service them, they call for maintenance, we come and help them, and you know, it's a great choice for them. So we do now service that part of the community. You know, assisted living and those different options, transitional housing. There's some companies that can provide apartment living, then they go into a transitional semi-assisted living all the way to assisted living. You know, there's companies that do that. You know, being zoning for that is probably a good idea, or being aware of it, having Dave be aware of that. I don't know how that would play into the, you know, the 830G conversation, but I mean, I think it's a needed segment, and you know, we're servicing it now as landlords. I mean, 25% of our clients are 65 and older.
And there are developers in Connecticut who do that kind of development where, you know, they're focused on, they're actually doing an 830G elderly component where whether it's, I think most of them are 62 and older, there's two different levels to the fair housing compliance, and these were 62 and over. And I think that's the kind of thing that you run into, and it's just, I think the idea of the high-density single-family homes
and it's
is
a separate
on that line.
point system as well for
Yes.
8-30.
Yep.
Yeah.
And for the elderly component too. Yep.
Is the elderly a tax credit type development, or is it fully private, similar to just a deed restriction? Is
I was
there
gonna say,
a
so-
carrot for the age restriction?
So there's a couple that I'm familiar with. We have a developer that I worked with early on in my career. He's just a fully private developer, and he builds small units designed for I think at that point his target demographic was 75 and up. You know, small unit, again 830G compliant. And on a personal level, my parents actually moved out of my childhood house into an 830G development. They live in one of the market rate units that was designed for a 55 and older first floor bedroom. And I think it has a real attraction, and it's frankly similar to the high density single family home where they're, you know, 10 feet apart, very dense, and it's a really attractive community that looks like a series of single-family houses.
Thank you both for adding those observations. Appreciate it.
It's a good pickup.
Yeah, go ahead. Earlier you were talking about chattel loans, first-time home buyer. Would something like that count as an affordable unit, just having that mortgage?
It counts on the 10% list. It does not count for moratorium points.
Okay, but that being said, if we were to do, say, a single-family high-density development, would you be able to deed restrict that to being first-time home buyers getting chattel loans?
The developer
I don't
could
think it
offer
would,
right?
I was going to say, I think you might be able to. I think the question would be whether your deed restriction then meets the requirements of 830G. I'd have to think about it, because there are certain requirements in the deed restriction for 830G about the number of years, and theoretically, if you paid off your chattel loan, you're no longer in that category, but you might be deed restricted. So that's where I'm thinking about the overlap between the two.
All right, it seems like something that might be worth exploring. I mean, especially the demand for single-family housing right now. I mean, maybe you could get to that 10% if you were to do a bunch of high-density single-family developments that were all chattel loans.
Yes, that's interesting. I mean, I think that's something you should look into. I mean, I think that, right? I mean, a developer can have an alliance with Chaffa to offer the loans. And the state's very open-minded with all this right now. I mean, this governor is very focused on affordable housing. He gets it. There's Chaffa just came out with a loan program, to help, right? So, I mean, they're very focused. I think that's a great idea. We build 200 you know, high-density, single-family homes for millennials, you know, they're going to pay off their student loan before they pay off, you know, their home mortgage, and, you know, that could be a wonderful way to pick up 200 units, you know, very quickly. I think that's a great idea. I mean, those are all the thoughts you're trying to come up with, right, Chair?
Exactly, yeah. I mean, I think maybe if we get somebody from Chaffa to come in and talk about their programs and
That's
get
a great
set out
idea. I
for
would love
us.
to come to that
And it
meeting.
also
Right.
educates the community at large, you know,
Yeah.
so it could be something that will be that worm on the hook that gets a developer to come into town and do something like that. So those are all good things. One question for both of you: if we're going to try to do some kind of a broad brush, I don't know how effective it will be, but it will be at least some good faith effort. Next, if we were to pick one or two zones that we should pick first to try to make some changes in the language to allow greater density, if you had to pick two, what would you
The office,
pick, or
if
would
it's
you
the
pick?
office district zones, I mean,
Yeah,
they just tore down Subway's world headquarters. Can you imagine that? You know the taxes that was paying in its heyday, and it was just thrown in the dumpster. I mean, that's the issue we're facing. There's this rotation that's occurring with your grand list, and I as a large taxpayer, someone who's very vested in Milford, please be aware of what's happening, because your decisions are going to affect that. So the office zones.
That's more bang for the buck than the CDD zones, you think?
Well, I think CDD is first of all, most CDD zones allow multifamily now. I think you need to you know, restructure the zoning requirements to allow more density. Maybe go to the 4-story, talk about stories instead of feet. And, you know, those I think are easy changes for you to make, because most of the CDD zones do allow, there's one that doesn't, I forget which one that doesn't allow multifamily. They should all allow multifamily, and I think that transition is really smart as these centers, you know, get in trouble financially, you know, to have a high-density option that can create land value, because you still have to create enough land value to tear an existing building down, even if it's in, you know, nail salons and hair salons and, you know, smoke shops or whatever. You still have to create economies.
Do you think
of scale.
mixed use, similar to the way we have in MCD, to have retail or office on the first floor and then
So,
residential up
yeah.
top for CDD zones?
Yeah, I think about that a lot. Most of my buildings are mixed use because I build in the MCD so often. I mean, those spaces don't make money. I mean, the rents are too low. Again, commercial rents, you know, retail, office are very low. So they don't even generate enough income to produce a yield on the cost, right? So they're necessary because I think you should have, they're all full, by the way. They're not generating enough revenue really to justify their existence. So the apartments are overcoming it for us. But on the Post Road, I go back and forth with it. I don't know if you're just going to create more vacant storefronts over time. And instead having robust landscaping and, you know, make it look really nice from the road with, you know, with attractive architecture, I think is more important than having the mixed use. But I think you've got to still think about that. I'm not sure that's the answer. But the office district zones should be your first choice because they're all in trouble.
And
Mark?
would you suggest to be to require a specific amount of affordability with those rezones?
I think that's inevitable. I think 10%, in my opinion, with all due respect to the board, because I respect this board and your goals and objectives. But I think 10% is a number that will not deter development, but get you some affordability that you desperately need. You know, affordability is a problem throughout the country. It's not just here. I mean, this is a problem that's everywhere. I mean, San Francisco, look at California, look at New York City. You know, we don't have mental institutions. A lot of these people are mentally ill. A lot of them are, and they have nowhere to go, and they are on the streets, and there's all these terrible things that are happening, and I want to see fixed. There's affordability problem for sure. How do you solve affordability? You build more units. Amy, right? More and more.
More is more.
Always more. You supply side, you add supply, and price comes down. So be careful you don't attenuate that by penalizing too much. And I was just trying to show that tonight, just to show you the impact and value.
Yeah, no, I fully understand that. I think we have to address that if we are going to put that in. We have to at least give some kind of relief, whether it's not to require mixed use on the commercial on the first floor. Your point is well taken that if it looks good and it really pencils better, then we might get more action and then get up to 15%.
Yeah, maybe that. I mean, that may be your number,
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman. I'm not here to tell you what to do. I'll tell you what I think.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
Yeah,
And I
I
appreciate your time, and I appreciate your time as well.
Yeah.
We'll probably ask you back again, both of you, at one point. I think that we will look to the Regulations Subcommittee. We'll meet, and then we'll sort of put the target out there and make some plans to get some more input from some experts and some community members, and then we can just keep moving forward. We're going to do this every meeting, and we'll, get some headway, get some steam going, and hopefully make some changes for the better. So I appreciate your effort and time and the board's attention and consideration. If there's nothing else, I'd move on. Okay, so we have next order of business is liaison report. We have one liaison, Mr. Saddi's not here. Subcommittee, we just have the one subcommittee that we're sort of all part and parcel of here, but we will have a meeting and David will get that notice out so that we can, I think the subcommittee will really just be headlights for the full committee, and we'll take the recommendation of the experts and the members of this committee on where to go next. But I think we can start with the office zones and start looking at that and what kind of language will make sense to start putting into place. So do we have approval of the minutes? Do we have a motion?
Second.
Okay, without objection, the minutes are approved. Chair's report, none. Just thank you for thoughts and consideration on the housing situation. Staff report?
None this evening.
Okay. Motion to adjourn. Without exception, we're adjourned. Thank you.